In the Supreme Court today, a debate about the movies, sort of. Producers of a withering 90-minute movie critique of Hillary Clinton argued that part of the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law is unconstitutional.
All right, so after oral arguments wrapped up, the justices retreated to what is perhaps the most secretive place in the known universe.
In the most private and perhaps important place inside the Supreme Court.
Or at least inside the court.
9 justices, and only them, meet together around a table in the justices' conference room. They discuss the cases heard at oral argument and begin the process of reaching a decision of the court.
This is a place where cameras will never go.
No one can enter the room.
Except for some reason C-SPAN once.
We return now to C-SPAN's feature documentary, The Supreme Court.
Once upon a time, C-SPAN, those bastards, were able to get into this room and film the table and the chair. It was riveting. No, I mean, I'm actually quite jealous because they didn't let us do that. They didn't let us see the special room or speak to the justices. So C-SPAN, yeah, they have some kind of deal with the devil. Anyhow, the point is we don't know what happened in that room on that day, but we can piece together a couple of things. And we can imagine the rest. I mean, we know that they went in. Clarence Thomas put on some tunes. RBG was like, wow, that book thing, I need a drink. Actually, we don't know that either of those two things happened, but it makes sense to me that Clarence Thomas would like the doobies. That just feels right. But what we do know is that the justices sat down in the usual order that they said.
We sit at the conference table in the same places every day.
Chief Justice Roberts gets things going with some discussion.
I initiate the discussion.
Because he always does.
For an argued case, I'll say this case is about this. The arguments are so-and-so, and I think we should reverse or affirm.
And so there was some conversation. And then, because again, this is standard, the Chief Justice called for a vote. This is the part we care about. He presumably asked his colleagues, okay, who here thinks that Citizens United has a case? Now, we know that the 4 liberal justices, Stevens, Ginsburg, Breyer, Souter, were like, no, they do not have a case. All that Citizens United is doing is making a campaign ad. This is electioneering. They're pretending it's a doc, but really it's not. They should be regulated. On the other side, we know that the 4 conservatives, Scalia, Thomas, Alito, Roberts, were like, yeah, they got a case. Citizens United's First Amendment rights are being pinched. And so you had a split, like you often do on this court. 4 liberals, 4 conservatives. But there are 9 justices, so as always, all attention turned to the man in the middle.
Justice Anthony Kennedy.
Justice Kennedy is 80. He's been on the court for almost 30 years. He is often the swing vote, making his opinion critical.
He is considered the court's pivotal swing vote.
In a court that's basically split down the middle, 4-4, Kennedy is the ultimate swing vote, the one ring to rule them all.
All right, let's just talk about Justice Kennedy for a second. He has been the swing vote on this court so many times that he's often called
the most powerful person in America.
The most powerful man in the country by many stretches.
Because very often his vote is the only vote that matters. You could argue that this one dude has determined more about your life as an American than almost any other single guy. But from the outside, for people who don't really know much about the court, i.e. me, you, well, maybe not you, but me, it can be really hard to predict what he is going to do on any given case, which way he's going to swing.
Hey, swinger.
For example, on a big voting rights case, he sides with the conservatives.
The Marshall Plan was very good, too, the Morrill Act, the Northwest Ordinance.
But on eminent domain, he sides with the liberals.
Hey, swinger.
It does seem ironic that 100% goes to the developer and not to the property owner.
Now, on gun rights, the Heller case, which we talked about, he swung conservative.
Hey, swinger.
In my view, it is a general right to bear arms quite without reference to the militia either way.
But on environmental protection, he goes liberal.
The greater the harm, the greater the risk.
Class action, he goes conservative.
It's not clear to me what is the unlawful policy.
Gay marriage, he goes liberal.
Same-sex couples may exercise the fundamental right to marry in all states. No longer may this liberty be denied to them.
He's a swinger.
The swinger knows the way it's happening and where the actions are going to be.
So, when the Chief Justice went around the room and got to Kennedy, he was like, all right, Kennedy, what's it going to be this time? From the outside, it was anyone's guess. But as I mentioned, one of the sort of cool things about the Citizens United case is it gives you a little window into the mind of this very powerful, very mysterious man. So before he answers, let's go into his mind.
I was born in Romania, Bucharest, Romania, in the days of communism.
You may wonder, why is there an Eastern European man in the brain of Justice Anthony Kennedy? That'll make sense in just a minute. Bear with me. For now, all you need to know is that this is Alex Kaczynski. He's an influential judge who sits on the Ninth Circuit in California.
My father was actually a party member. He was sort of a member of the party before the war.
This is World War II.
He truly believed in communism and thought it was a great system and revered it.
But Alex remembers a moment when he was at his dad's office.
I guess I was about 7 years old, or 7 or 8 or something, and my father wasn't there.
But a couple of other communist officials were, and as they're standing there, Alex picks up a newspaper, starts reading it.
It was a newspaper called Free Romania, and so I read Free Romania, and then I was starting to be funny, I guess. I said, well, I don't know why they call it Free Romania, because there are so many people in prison.
You just thought he was making a joke.
But apparently this got my father into very serious trouble.
The officials essentially threatened his dad because of this joke.
The question was whether they were teaching me disloyal things at home. Eventually they cleared him, but it was touch and go. So after that, my father had this signal. He says, if you're ever in public with me and you say something and you hear me pinching my nose and sniffing, you just stop talking. Whatever it is you're saying, you don't give an explanation, you don't continue, you just stop talking.
Years later, Alex Kaczynski would leave Romania, leave communism behind, come to California, become a lawyer, then a clerk.
A clerk in Sacramento for Anthony Kennedy, who was then a new judge on the Ninth Circuit.
And he says he told Anthony Kennedy this story.
Oh, yes.
And they talked a lot about what it's like to live in a place where you can't speak your mind.
Oh, sure, of course.
Now, who knows what exact effect this had on Anthony Kennedy's mind, but we know that story is in there.
On my honor, I will do my best.
Mixed in with all the Cub Scout oaths of his youth and the sights and smells of Sacramento, California, where he grew up. And of course, mixed in with all the Catholic church services and stuff from, summers spent in Austria teaching. But we know that story was in there. And the reason why I pointed out is that we also know that at a certain point growing up, Anthony Kennedy read a book that really lodged in his head.
1984, one of the most important works ever written.
1984, of course, is the dystopian novel by George Orwell. Kennedy talks about it all the time in speeches.
In 1984, the dictatorship was always surveilling you.
Trying to control your thoughts.
You're a thought criminal.
And 1984 has one of the most brilliant scenes in literature. The protagonist is being tortured.
Do you remember writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4?
They want him to say that 2 and 2 is 5. And finally he can't stand the torture anymore.
5, anything you like, only please stop it.
So, okay, 2 and 2 is 5.
Stop the pain.
But the torture continues. He said, why are you continuing? He said, the torture continues, not until you just say it, but until you believe it.
I wish I could.
Which do you wish? To persuade me that you can see 5, or really to see them?
Really to see them.
Better.
This is a powerful reminder that governments want to plan your destiny. They want to plan what you think, and this must never happen.
So clearly, inside Anthony Kennedy's mind, and maybe this is as close to an ideology as he has. He's often talked about as having very little discernible ideology. Well, maybe this is it. Inside his mind, there is a fear, a primal fear of the government getting too close, of it reaching its authoritarian tentacles into our lives, in our minds, in our bodies.
The framers had an idea which is central to Western thought.
This is how he put it at his Supreme Court confirmation hearing in 1987.
And that is that there is a zone of liberty, a zone of protection, a line that's drawn
where the individual can tell the government, beyond this line you may not go.
And so, to go back to the secret room, when Chief Justice Roberts asked Justice Kennedy, all right, Kennedy, which way are you going to swing? I imagine what he said, emphasis on the word imagine, is, all right, Mr. Chief, I know you think I'm a swinger. I know everybody else thinks I'm a swinger, but on this issue, I do not swing. Not only do I think that Citizens United has a case, but I think that campaign finance law that would limit their speech should burn. Burn, motherfucker, burn!
The government of the United States stood in front of our court and said that it was lawful to ban a book. That can't be right.
Now, we know that two things happened after Kennedy sort of gave his answer and said, let's go big, let's tear it down. We know that the conservatives on the court were like, I like where you're going with this, and they started to gravitate to his side. We also know that David Souter, he was the justice in court.
She'll lie about anything. She's deceitful. She's ruthless, cunning, dishonest. I mean, this sounds to me like campaign advocacy.
Who was basically accusing Citizens United of trying to pretend they weren't playing politics when really they were. We know that Justice Souter got really pissed. Because if we go into David Souter's mind, his room within a room, the view is very different. David Souter is a New Englander. He's quiet, bookish, spends long afternoons reading, walking through the silent hemlock forest. There's a story that Souter's home in New Hampshire was stacked with so many books that his house actually needed a new foundation. Which is to say, his reaction here was very out of character. By all accounts, he was not happy, because Kennedy's whole thing that liberty is the law and nothing should compromise that for Souter set off alarm bells.
Because if I exercise my liberty to the greatest possible extent, I can suppress the rights of a lot of people.
That is Souter giving a talk in 2012, and what he means is that liberty and equality have to be in balance.
They both can't win all the way, all the time.
And if corporate money just starts pouring into elections, that's basically handing a megaphone to the richest people in society.
There's got to be the possibility of a limitation on corporations so that they do not drown out other speech.
No, we don't really know what David Souter was thinking in this moment, but I imagine him thinking forward to everything that was about to happen.
An explosion in political campaign donations.
The Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers. These two brothers are trying to buy America.
More billionaires are backing Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump.
Essentially, super PACs are allowed to give unlimited funds.
Hillary Clinton gaining support from the wealthy.
A secretive billionaire hedge fund tycoon is credited by many with playing an instrumental role in Donald Trump's election.
Whatever he was actually thinking in that moment, we know that after Kennedy made his stand, said, let's go big, Justice Souter
wrote a very, very strong draft dissent.
A real bridge-burning dissent.
It's explosive.
Marcia Coyle, Jeff Toobin, Jeffrey Rosen of the National Constitution Center.
He said that Kennedy's opinion is really an illegitimate use of the court's power.
That the way the court was proceeding was wrong.
Souter accuses the court of judicial activism.
Of overreaching, of taking a narrow case.
A teeny little case about one teeny little film.
And then using it illegitimately as a hobby horse to really rewrite the laws of campaign finance regulation.
He argued that this kind of move essentially makes them, the court, look like a bunch of political hacks.
It's questioning the integrity of the court itself.
Now, unfortunately, we can't read that dissent that Souter wrote because his papers won't be public until 50 years after his death. All we know is that he most certainly sent a draft around to the other 8 justices.
And then what I've been told is Justice Souter went to Chief Justice Roberts and said basically, look, if we do this now, we will look bad.
Your court, the Roberts Court,
will look bad. Someone described his argument as there are a few institutional hot buttons that you press and the court stops and thinks. And Justice Souter was pressing one of those hot buttons.
Apparently, saying to a Chief Justice that your court is going to look bad is like the Supreme Court equivalent of going nuclear. In the meantime, while all this is happening, you've got the 3 Bs, Bose, Bossy, Bop.
Bose, Bossy, Bop, Bop, Bop. Bose, Bossy, Bop, Bop, Bop. Bose, Bossy,
Just dying for an outcome, and apparently every day...
We would go down to the court to see if they were going to issue a decision in our case that day. And, of course, each day, no decision, no decision, no decision.
Yeah, and it's now the end of June.
So now we're down to the last day of the court.
10 a.m., June 29th. We're back in the court.
Before the justices come on the bench, the clerk of the court walks into the courtroom and goes up to Ted Olson.
He is, if you recall, the lawyer for the Bs.
And says, I'm going to have to talk to you something unusual is going to happen. And Ted Olson, he told me later, his first thought was, uh-oh, did I do something wrong?
The marshal calls order.
The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Oyez, oyez, oyez.
The chief opens the session, and then...
In 1964, Congress enacted the Civil Rights Act.
Kennedy reads an opinion in a different case. And then RBG reads a dissent.
But they had no vested right to promotion.
In a different case. And then Scalia gets up there.
The bark of state law remains, but its bite does not.
With an opinion in a different case.
This is a strange result.
But finally, Chief Justice Roberts comes back in.
And so the very last thing the Chief Justice says before he, ends the term.
Case number 08205, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission.
Is there will be re-argument in Citizens United.
Is set for re-argument later this term.
Boom.
Chief Justice Roberts basically says, we're not going to make up our mind today. We're going to come back and talk about this again. And we're going to debate it on Kennedy's terms. Is the campaign finance law, McCain-Feingold, an infringement of free speech? And then after he says that, this is what happens next.
And now we note with sadness that this is the last session in which our friend and colleague, Justice David Souter, will be on the bench with us.
Souter is out.
We wish him the best in his well-deserved retirement. On this occasion, we have sent Justice Souter a letter that I will now read. It's dated today. Dear David, we have all felt a profound sense of loss since the announcement of your decision to retire.
Eventually, he quotes the New England poet Robert Frost.
We understand your desire to trade white marble for white mountains and return to your land of easy wind and downy flake. Though you will not be among us in our daily labors.
After he finishes, Justice Souter's turn.
I've written the following reply. Dear colleagues, your generous letter has touched me more than I can say, and I will only try to leave you with some sense of what our common service has meant to me.
He also quotes Robert Frost.
You quoted the poet, and I will too, in words that set out the ideal of the life engaged, where love and need are one. That phrase accounts for the finest moments of my life on this court as we have agreed or contended with each other over those things that matter to decent people in a civil society. For 19 terms, I have lived that life with you, all of us sharing our own best years with one another, working side by side as fellow servants and as friends. I will not sit with you at our bench again after the court rises for the sum of this time, but neither will I retire from our friendship, which has held us together despite the pull of the most passionate dissent. It has made the work lighter through all my tenure here, and for as long as I live, I will be thankful for it and be under a very grateful obligation to each one of you. Yours affectionately, David.
All right, let's be real. I mean, we cannot say for certain why Justice Souter retired at that moment.
Justice Souter had said for a long time that he didn't like D.C., that he wanted to have time to hike while he was still vigorous enough to do it.
We also will probably never know exactly why Roberts held the case over for re-argument. What we do know is in holding the case over, that meant Souter's inflammatory bridge-burning dissent would never be published. The Roberts court got to save face.
And not have this kind of internal fight, dirty laundry aired.
And basically avoided the embarrassment that would have come from the publication of this explosive dissent.